Hello, hello.
Hi, Cal. How's it going?
Great. How are you?
Oh, I'm so good. And I love the background, especially for today. It's
I
so
know.
it's so fitting. You're so on brand.
I totally was on brand today. I laughed because I think this is our third
Yeah.
interview,
Yep.
and every time I've had a different background for you.
I love the spice of life is variety. You're keeping us on our toes.
That's right. You might stay in the closet, but Christy, I am everywhere.
There you go. See? And that's the point, right? So I love you coming back on because I'm sitting here and seeing how beautiful it is today. And it's like the perfect segue of what you're going to be talking about, because the first was about open-heartedness. The first piece about writing was just the person who's like, oh my gosh, I really want to write a book. I don't even know where to start. And maybe they start talking themselves out of it. So then you helped demystify some of the fears that come, which we'll have you recap for people. And I'll also put in the link below to that episode so people can see it. But this is the second part of, okay, so you've gotten through the hurdle of actually sitting down to write. And what does it look like? What are you really getting yourself into? What's the entire process for people who want to dip their toe in? So my point is, now I'm seeing how beautiful it is. And it's like buds are starting to sprout. So it's like ideas are starting to sprout through for people, and they're wanting to really see it come to fruition. So that's what we're going to dive into, is the entire process of what people can expect with writing a book.
I love that. I love the idea of, maybe a seed was planted and now maybe it's time for it to start growing. It's always that energy of spring, the bright sunshine today, it gets people, that creative energy gets stirred, right? So I think it's a great segue to what we're talking about today.
I love it. And just for people who maybe didn't tune into the last time that you were on, can you just recap maybe like the top 2 most popular fears that you hear from people and how to overcome them?
Yes. I would say the top 2 fears, and there are many, but the top 2, the first one is, I've always wanted to write a book, but I just don't even know where to begin. It seems so daunting and like such a like big, heavy lift to make it happen. And so I get that a lot. People not starting because they're afraid to begin. They don't even know where to begin. And the second one I would say that I hear a lot is, I have something to say, but I'm afraid that I'm not a good enough writer to be able to say it in a way that it would become a book. So worried about their skill set and their writing skills to make that happen. So those are probably the 2 most common ones I hear. There are certainly others. So if you're a listener right now and you've thought about writing a book and you have another fear different than that, there are certainly many, but those 2 are pretty common.
I feel like, especially the first one, where do I begin? It can seem very daunting. And I do not have the experience yet on the process of writing a book. I do feel like you and Greg Justice, who's the co-founder of Scriptor Publishing with you guys have really tightened up a 7-step process that will allow people who are just kind of, okay, what does this entail? What am I getting into? You really allowed them to have a bird's eye view beforehand. So although it may not be as in depth as like actually experiencing it, they can at least have an idea of what to expect. So the where do I begin that can be really daunting and overwhelming, there could be a sense of relief with that. And then in regards to the not good enough writer, you jump into that with a 7-step process too. So we're not going to keep anybody more with bated breath. We're going to have you just head right in.
What are the 7 steps? Yes. And before I begin and kind of outline and share those with you, I will also say that you can go to our website and get a free download of these 7 steps. They're not rocket science. We like to share them with everybody. And we also wrote a book called From Dream to Published, which is on Amazon, and it goes in more in depth on all of these. And it's the 7 steps as well. So if people are interested and they want to learn more, a good first step would be doing one of those 2 things. So you kind of get the bigger picture. But with that said, one of the things that Greg and I wanted to do early on was create a system so that this could be a process that anybody could go through, no matter what kind of book they wanted to write. And so that's why we came up with this 7-step process. And these are the 7 steps. And then we can dive into some of them, whatever you think would be useful. But these are the 7 steps. So if you're someone out there who has always wanted to write a book and you didn't know where to begin, you can download the PDF and get these, or start here with step number 1. Step number 1 is getting your ideas flowing with a brain dump, or what we might call a mind map. So if you're a creative person, there are ideas flowing through your mind all the time. If you're thinking about writing a book, there's ideas floating around. You might even be talking to people about your ideas. But when they're in your head, they don't make any sense. We've got to get them out of your head and down onto a piece of paper somehow. And that process is a little different for everybody, but it is basically a brain dump, like anything you can think of that might be possible to put in your book. It might be random thoughts. It might be quotes that you think would be useful. It might be pictures that you want to add in there. It might be chapter titles. It might be colors of the book cover, whatever it is that you're just have been spinning around. Number 1, put it down on paper, brain dump. Then once you see it all, however you get it down, you can start to organize it. All of a sudden, when you see it out of your head, you can maneuver it, manipulate it a little bit more, and you can start to organize it. Like, oh, these ideas seem to go together. Maybe that would be one chapter, or maybe this doesn't really belong in this book. It's another book. It doesn't really make sense compared to what seems to be coming out over here. So you start to organize it, and you might even put it into an outline form so that you could see kind of sequentially how all those ideas start to come together and make some sense. Ultimately, that outline can become your table of contents. So, it kind of gives you that structure. And then step number 3 is then writing it. So taking that outline and just starting to expand on it, adding content to each of those sections to the point that you can, whatever you want to say, get it down. We could talk more about the writing process because it sounds pretty simple, but it's obviously that's the crux of it. You got to take the time and get it written. But that's step number 3. Step number 4 is editing. And as much time as writing takes, editing is probably even a longer process because you really want to get a good editor to help you make what you wrote sound better. And that might mean restructuring it, reorganizing it a little bit. It might mean just cleaning up some of the grammar. But there's an editing process that you want to go through, and you want to get somebody else to do some of that editing with you, because it's always good to have somebody that's got that skill to work beside you and help you refine the writing. So that's step number 4. Step number 5 is then you've got to get it from looking like a book report to looking like a book. So you've got to do some design work, which means you've got to have a graphic designer to design a book cover, the exterior design, and you have to have an interior designer, a graphic designer, do the interior of the book. So that's step number 6. No, 5. Step number 6 is then you got to publish it. So now you've got a book cover, you've got this great looking inside of a book, and now you have to go through the publishing process. With us, Scriptor, we use Amazon as our publishing platform. Their publishing platform is called Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP. Because it's the largest bookseller in the world, that's why we use Amazon. So step number 6 is that, but certainly it's not the only publishing option available to you. There are many others, and we can talk about what those would be as well. And then step number 7 is now you've got a book, you're published, and it looks really great when it's on your shelf, but wouldn't it be great if it was on a lot of other people's shelves as well? So step number 7 is marketing. And that is the longest part of the process, because marketing begins the day that you hold the book in your hand and it ends the day you die. You can market literally for the rest of your life because you have that tool in that book that you can share always. So marketing is from there forward in whatever capacity you want to do that. So that's it. That's sort of the brief rundown, the 7 steps that you go through, and we can dive into any of those a little deeper if you'd like to.
Yeah. So before we even do that, I'm wondering, so thank you, first of all, for just fleshing them out so clearly. I'm curious, is there a certain point in the 7-step process where you start seeing people's steam? Because I don't want to assume it's in the writing. It might not be. Like, is there a point where you're feeling that the benefit of you also being a coach is that you're able to boost people? Is there a common point?
A really good question. The vast majority of people will have the biggest challenge and the biggest part of it, which is the writing and the editing. So some people, they are on fire and they can get it written, but then once they have to go back and work with it and fix it, then they sort of lose some of their momentum. And other people just aren't comfortable with the writing or struggle with the writing. But once the editor gets with them, they can pick up the pace a little bit. But almost always that's the place where it starts to slow down. Once you get to the part where you start designing it, the energy picks up again, because then you start to see it. It becomes tangible. You see the book cover. You see what the book looks like on the inside. You see it coming together. And that's always an exciting part of the process. So that piece is where energy picks up. And then, of course, marketing, everybody's got their own experience with marketing. So some people lose a lot of steam with marketing because they just don't even want to do any of that or have any idea of how to. And other people have a great system in place and, can market from here every day, and have no problem. So I would say the vast majority of it really gets kind of sticky in that writing editing component.
I didn't want to assume that. It seems like that probably would be the piece. It's right in the chunk. It's like the idea is so exciting and it's very ideal. And then once you start seeing on paper, it might be like, even during the brain dump, it might be like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And so all of a sudden you start maybe getting in your head about it. And so one part too that you were saying is, where can people expect, and again, this is generalizing, so it may not, my gut feeling is like, to anchor during the process, it would be to find one person that is in your head of who this is written for, whether it's in memory of them or whether it's someone that you're hoping gets this in their hands before maybe they make the same. Everybody's life is different, but before maybe they make mistakes that you made and they can learn from it. Or what's an anchor point that you, if at all, advise people to hold them through so that with all the other stuff swirling around, that they stay solid?
Yeah, really, really great question. Yes, part of writing a book is understanding who your audience is. And so when you get stuck in that writing process, if you know and have a vision of that person that you're out there trying to reach, it does make it easier. When you recognize that the writing is happening so that you can help that person, it also creates some more momentum because it becomes about them more than it becomes about you. So that is one really good tool. Having a coach is another good tool, because or just a friend or a spouse or significant other, or somebody who keeps you accountable. That's another anchoring.
Doesn't it get a little dodgy if you have it be in-house? Like if you have an in-house accountability buddy while you're writing a book, I would think the divorce rate would skyrocket.
It might skyrocket. It depends on your relationship. Pick your accountability partner carefully.
Yes.
But yeah, somebody that will keep you motivated and can do check-ins for you so that you do accomplish. I have so many people that I just do quick check-ins with that will say, if I didn't even have that 15-minute check-in, I wouldn't have done it. But because I did, I got done what I said I was going to. So that's another great anchoring tool for somebody, to just have a check-in partner, an accountability partner somehow with it. But the third piece I'll say to it, and I think this is an important thing to consider. Whenever you're creating anything, whatever it is, you get this idea, but the process of creation, the manifestation of it, comes through you. It's not really from you. You can talk about it however you want, but there's this idea kind of swirling out there, and we get the idea and then we put it out through us in some capacity, right? So if you have any kind of practice where you can meditate or breathe or do something before you begin writing so that you can remove yourself from the process and just allow the flow to happen. We hear people talk about getting in the flow, right? Getting in the flow, whether that's in writing or running or whatever it is. Getting in the flow is when you have the ability to get out of the way so that it can just come out. It's that experience when you've been driving and suddenly you realize you've gone so far and you don't know what you just saw because you were in some other flow state, right? Or when you've been writing and then you read back what you wrote and you think, where did that come from? Did I really write that? Any practice that you can do to get you to allow that to happen makes the process so much easier and really so fulfilling to be able to have that experience of the flow.
I say all three. I feel like if you could find all three, and I don't think that's too much of an ask. I feel like that could be a very reassuring, supportive structure of like, get clear on, and it doesn't need to be that you're helping in saving the world. It could be entertainment. It could be like, I want to just inspire people and I want to entertain people. And a major radar for that is that you get giddy when you're writing, then you know you're on the right track, and so that paired with an accountability buddy. I love that you said such a short amount of time, 15 minutes, even a 5-minute, even a text that comes through. You send such wonderful supportive texts because you're a writer yourself. So you can hear your voice. You write like the way you speak, which is helpful. So it can even be a text that comes through, which is awesome to keep you going. And then that idea of being in that flow state and pairing on to what you're saying, that idea of reminding yourself that you are a microcosm in this huge world. So anything that can allow you to just, nature, of course, is the go-to, I think, for the vast majority of us. Just that reminder, standing under a redwood tree or an oak tree or something, being near water, that just reminds you like you're this small thing and there's such a bigger part of the world that's out there. I think it's so helpful, and it reminds us of the interconnectedness too. So I love that. It's such a smooth way to support. And when you were talking about being able to have these moments of, wow, I can't believe I just wrote that. Where did that come from? It reminded me, and I don't know why, because it doesn't necessarily have to do with like this idea of, wow, where did that came from somewhere else? But it reminded me that I think may benefit anybody who's listening is I heard Jerry Seinfeld on Tim Ferriss's podcast. Did you listen? Did I tell you about it? Oh my God, you got to listen. Me more. It was fantastic. I'm going to send it to you after this. It was fantastic. Jerry Seinfeld was so funny and very serious in a way too, but where it was very intriguing. And he was talking about the writing process. And he was saying how there needs to be two hats. Like the first hat, when you're writing, you have to be like your internal nurturing mama bear. Like just everything is okay. Everything like coddling, like it's perfect. It's wonderful. Like, yes, that's a great sentence. You just have to like go ego hard. Mm-hmm. And then you need to step away. And this, is not in lieu of having an actual editor. This might be before. If you decide to self-edit a little bit before, you got to switch hats to a drill sergeant. He's like, I think he compared it to like, who is it? Lou Gossett in Officer and a Gentleman, who was like so like, he's like, you got to turn into him and just go, like, you're totally objective. You're not looking at it like it's your mother looking over a story you wrote. Like you're just objectively looking at it. Like, would I want to read this? Would I want to partake in this? And I just thought that was such a really fun and humorous way to alleviate so much pressure that we can put on ourselves when we're putting a creation that we birthed into the world.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah. And yes, all of that. What I caution against is becoming a drill sergeant too soon. So I like that he said that, be the coddler first, because what happens is people start to get self-critical and then that stops them. And they just, it's like putting the brakes on in the car. They'll stop and they'll get really stuck in it, maybe not even finish. So coddle yourself, let yourself write it. Whatever needs to be said, write it. Then you can go back and you can edit to your extent that you can and be that drill sergeant. And then get an editor who will really do that for you with the mutual goal of making this the very best that it can be. Sometimes it's hard to it's so personal, it's hard to take that, but recognize that the editor is your collaborator, really working to make it the best. So they might be the best drill sergeant of all.
Yeah.
But allow that, because that's what makes it makes the work shine.
I love that. And also there's two things. The first is also know yourself. Like if you're someone who you're tender for criticism, don't do the drill sergeant piece at all and just find an editor. I mean, you don't have to do that, but if you're someone who, which we're going to get into in a minute about self-publishing versus publishing, and you still may want to find an editor anyway, which is what I believe you're saying, like definitely a third,
Yes.
third party is helpful. But having I lost my train of thought. Hold on one second.
Knowing yourself, being really recognizing
yes,
where you are.
thank you. Like just knowing like that is not something that you even can dabble in, or you're going to go down the rumination, like, just the tidal wave of it, and you're not going to come back, then skip it. It's not like you have to. That was just a part of the option. And the other is also, can you speak briefly to how can you vet editors who, and this might be a gut thing, but just in regards to being able to really keep your voice in the story?
Yeah. Finding editors is a process, and I don't necessarily recommend that you hire or use your best friend who was an English major. That's not really the best editor. I've learned that the hard way, but it's worth the effort. If you really want to put out a good piece of work, it's worth the effort to do the vetting, to go out and speak to, interview some different editors, have them submit work that they've done so you can see how they took whatever was unedited and then got it to the edited version. That way you'll get a much better sense of how they edit and how that matches what you're looking for. Take the time, because that editing piece is so critical to making it a really good book.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I feel like that often gets overlooked. Like the writing is the most important. And it seems like it's maybe kind of, is it 60-40, like editing, writing?
For some people, it might even be more than that, because
Okay.
maybe they're not great writers and they really need the editor to come in and help them refine it and give them ideas of what else they could write or how they could reword it so that it sounds better. So for some people, it may be even more than that. Maybe you're just not a great writer. You just have some good ideas. Another option, of course, if you want to, is that you can get a ghostwriter. You don't have to write it yourself. If you just have a great idea, but you don't feel competent to write it yourself, you can always get a ghostwriter. So that's another option.
Yeah, that's always there. And ghostwriting is so prevalent. I mean, I don't think people realize how prevalent it is. The one thing I will stress is make sure if you're getting a ghostwriter, this sounds like a no-brainer, make sure it sounds like you. Because yes. I've read books that were ghostwriters and I was like, this person wrote an autobiography. Like, it doesn't sound like they're speaking about themselves. And it just threw me and I wasn't able to get through books. And it's like, you just want to make sure that it is absolutely your voice. And jump on this one, Cal, too, is have someone else read it who knows you really well. Like, does this sound like me? Would you believe that this was me? Or don't even tell them you didn't write it and see, you know what I mean? And then maybe ask them afterwards, like let them in on it afterwards. Do you have any other advice on that one?
Yeah, I just agree with you completely, because recognize that this is really your business card in its own way, and you're in the world, right? So whatever you're putting out there, if it isn't you, if it doesn't match you and it's not authentic, you will lose trust with your audience, and the authority that you're looking to build by actually having the book will be lost.
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with you. If you get a ghostwriter, make sure that they're using your voice and that they're tailoring it so it does sound like you.
And it's time and it's money. So, I mean,
Correct.
You just want to make sure. So, okay. So self-published.
And I will
yes.
add to that, although that's an option, my experience is and I have seen every kind of writing you can imagine. Very, very few people are so poor at writing that they need the ghostwriter. Honestly, if you have a good editor, even if your writing is not high caliber, whatever you perceive that to be, the editor will help you with that. So in my experience, most people can write their own books. They just need to get that extra editing piece to really refine it.
Yeah. But like we talked about in the last conversation we had about getting through the hurdles of the fears that might stop you from writing, and we'll put it in this one too, that transcription.
Rev.com.
So if you are someone who is interested in writing and you're just like, I have a great idea and I speak really well, because not everybody speaks and writes the same. Some people do. But if you're someone who doesn't, this is the thing. Let the whole idea of something bigger than you drive you so that you're able to overcome your ego of like, oh, I'm not, and just go, you know what? This purpose of this, the point of it, the benefit for the world or other people or a certain population is so much greater than me getting in my own way. I'm just going to transcribe it and send it to an editor. It's like, right? So yes. So there's ways to do this, which is so awesome.
Exactly.
Okay.
And even I'll just add on to that though, even if your goal is just like, you just always wanted to have the book, it's really not about other people reading it. Even if it's just, I just always wanted to have my own book, that's enough to drive you too. So even if it is just that passion project for yourself, great. Just use that energy and momentum to get it done.
Yes. And I will pin into that. If you're someone who's like, I really want, chances are you're a writer. I feel like only writers would want that. The people who are like, oh, I don't want to have to do this, are probably feeling they need it for business, like to promote their business. So
that's right.
So there's space for everybody is basically what
right.
Kelly's saying, which is awesome. And I want to make sure we hit on this too. So the big thing about publishing, so self-publishing versus traditional publishing, just if you can hit on some key starters for people, pros, cons.
Yes, and it's so good. And it's actually great segue out after what you just said. There is space here for everybody. And the reason that there is space is because there is this thing called self-publishing, which allows you, whoever you are, to write and publish your book. So a lot of people, when they come to us, you don't know about publishing, you haven't published your book yet. So their only frame of reference is what we would call traditional publishing, the way publishing was before the computer and internet became what it is, before Amazon really grew. Traditional publishing is old publishing houses like Random House and Simon & Schuster and Little Brown. Those are publishing companies who are there to help you take your idea and make it into a book. And that is certainly an option. With traditional publishing, there are some positives. The pros, I would say, with traditional publishing are that they're established. A lot of those big publishing houses especially are established, and even some of the smaller ones, they have a cultivated market already and an expansive market. So it gets your book the possibility of into a lot of hands. Also with traditional publishing, if they do accept your book, they give you that editor and you've got that connection, and they're going to really work to get the book to the quality that they will want it to be, to have their name on it. So you've got a big powerhouse behind you. Another piece that I think is a pro of traditional publishing is the royalties. So if you have a book that actually can sell, and they won't look at you unless it can. So if you've been accepted, they expect a certain amount are going to sell, then you will get the royalty payments for that from that publishing company. And those are because of their reach and the amount that they could sell. Those are probably going to be higher in a lot of cases than self-publishing, at least to begin with. So those are some of the pros of traditional publishing. The cons, however, are numerous. Number one is that they are so inundated that it is extremely difficult to get accepted. Doesn't mean you can't, but the process is arduous and it's long, and it typically involves a lot of rejection before you get a success. Most people now, because that process is so difficult, have turned to literary agents to get their books published with a traditional publishing house. So there will be an investment of money for a literary agent. There will be an investment of time for finding that person. And then there's also a long process of preparing the manuscript and getting the whole abstract together and, you know, getting all of it put together so that it can be submitted. And then there's a waiting process to get it done. So the process is arduous. In terms of percentage of what get accepted versus don't, it's a very slim percentage that do get accepted. And the other downside, which is recent, is traditional publishing houses won't even begin to look at you unless you have a following of X number of followers. So where in the past, traditional publishing houses used to do all the marketing of your book, they would set up your book tour and they would get the book out to the bookstores and they would do all of that for you. Today, they will do some of that, but they're not doing all of it. So they're actually relying on your network to do a lot of the marketing as well. And so many traditional publishing houses won't even look at you unless you have X number of followers to show that you actually have a network worthy of them doing it. That's a downside for a lot of people. So you may not even get there if you don't have that. And then the other piece to that is, even though they used to do all the marketing, now they are actually wanting you to do the marketing as well. So where it used to be like, oh, well, once the book's done, they'll take care of it. It isn't so much that anymore. So even in a traditional published book, you're still doing a lot of the marketing. So it's certainly an option. It's what most people think of when they think of publishing. But there's a lot of downsides to it, which is, of course, why self-publishing became a thing, because there are a lot of stories out there that are worthy of being published. There are a lot of ideas out there that should be out into the vast masses that are not getting picked up for all those reasons. And so the self-publishing market has continued to grow, and self-publishing has, of course, still some pros and cons. So the pros of self-publishing are no wait time, other than your own getting it done and going through those 7 steps, right? Nobody's going to have to reject you to get it there. And you're not going to have to go through that arduous process of waiting for them to decide. If you want to publish it and you do those things, you can do it. That's huge. Another upside to self-publishing is you retain 100% of the copyright. What I didn't mention with traditional publishing is a lot of times they take the copyright. It becomes their book, which means you lose control of it. With self-publishing, full control, 100% of the copyright, anything you want to do with your book is yours, and 100% of the profit you make is yours. So self-publishing gives you a lot more control. You don't have to have those literary agents. You don't have to spend all that kind of money. So you can have control of it and do with it what you want to do with it yourself. So that's a huge plus. Self-publishing also allows you to be published in a lot of different marketplaces. You can do Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the independent bookstores. So you're not restricted from any of the places that books are sold. So there's a lot of, benefits to self-publishing. The downsides of self-publishing are, because it's yours, you are the one who really needs to market it. So again, that's a process that everyone takes in their own stride, in their own way. Some people will hire companies to market for them, or PR firms or marketing firms to help them do it. Some people will just do it on their own. Some people have a good marketing system and can do it, but you will have to go to the bookstores and say, here's my book if you want to sell it. You will have to call the radio station to be on the radio station. That falls on you. So I think that's probably one of the biggest cons of self-publishing. But as I said, even traditional publishing houses are relying on you much more to do more of that work. So it's not quite the exact opposite of the traditional publishing house anymore. So those are kind of the ins and outs. What we do at Scriptor is we help you self-publish. We found through our own experience of rejections from traditional publishing houses that that the process of self-publishing is completely doable, that if your story is there and it needs to be shared, you can get it out there. And the faster you can get it and the more control you have over what you can do with it, the better for many of us. So it's a very realistic and very real option.
Thank you so much. That was so clear. There's so much to process, and at the same time, it's very clear. So, and I want to add on too that in regard to the marketing piece, if someone does decide to self-publish, there are pieces within that too. Like if you might be able to just get a consultant 2-hour consultation with a marketing company, like, this is what I'm thinking. Can you just give me like an idea of best steps to start? Great. You might want to go straight to a marketing company to do it all, because you just know, again, this is about knowing yourself. You know that it's just so you've gone through all the steps and you're just like, I'm depleted. Or life throws you a curveball and you work so hard and all of a sudden you're like, right now I can't do this. So there are options in between that. And the last thing you said, when I was thinking, when you were saying like, you're going to be the one who has to call the radio stations and call the newspapers and do all of that, podcasts and everything. I feel like going back full circle, that's where really anchoring yourself into, okay, so maybe you are that person who's like, I just really wanted to write a book. Chances are there's a deeper reason. And even if it's just fun, like there has to be something there. Something bigger than you will help drive you to market, because you won't be marketing for yourself, which I feel the self-promotion piece can really stop people in their tracks. Some people might fly through the writing and the editing, and all of a sudden they have to talk about it. They might be beautiful writers, and then all of a sudden speaking, they're like, I can't do it. So I just feel like that could be something really helpful and supportive. Again, putting your energy out, whether it's on a population or whether it's in memory of somebody or it's for a specific cause or entertainment, could be really helpful. I want to make sure I stress that. Do you have anything else to add there, Kel?
Yeah, I think it's true. Marketing can be daunting for people. So knowing yourself, knowing where your skill set is, hiring people in whatever capacity that you need to help supplement that is good. And then always just remember, like, once you have the book, then you always have the book. So maybe you do a big push when you launch the book and, you're showing it to everybody, and then it fades away, and at some other point you're in a conversation and suddenly you're able to say, hey, I've got a book. I'll send you a copy, or order it on Amazon or whatever. It's always something you can just bring into your life because it's there. So yes, if it motivates you to realize that it's about other people, and if they don't get to see it, then they don't get the message. That's huge. So remember that those people are out there. If it is self-promotion, though, if you're just a person who's like, I just want to see this and I want people to buy it, that's fine as well. Know who you are, know the purpose of writing it, and then just recognize that marketing is a bit at a time, over time, in whatever capacity works well for you. But the more that you market it, obviously, the more people get your message, and that's what we want.
Absolutely. And the last part I'll say about that is, I love the idea that you can have this surge and then it can kind of maybe slow down. And then you can say, you know what, first time through, I didn't do it exactly how I wanted to. I'm going to try it again in 6 months. That is wonderful, as long as it's not a timely topic. So if it's a timely topic, and that probably goes without saying, I do feel like it's worth just throwing in there. If it's a timely topic, obviously you're going to have a window. So you'll probably be able to be creative enough. And if you're not, you could do like an hour consultation with a marketing company on like, it was about this, and now I feel like I lost my window. They'll be able to find a swing to it to bring it back in. But
that's right.
Yeah.
And even if it was a timely topic, you can always do a second edition. If you need to update it to whatever is happening now, or you've added some experience or knowledge that you want to share, you can always, especially with self-publishing, you just take what you have, edit it, add it, and then publish that as well. So that's another option for you if you decide that it's a, kind of a timely topic, and you're not something that you would market for the rest of your life.
Yes. Kelli, thank you so much. Is there anything else that's standing out to you that I feel like you covered so much so concisely? Is there anything else that you feel just one more thought you want to get in?
Guess I just want to say that if you're somebody out there who is just feeling that nudge, and maybe it's something that you always dreamed of, or maybe just recently you've just been feeling that sort of internal push that you've got a story, you've got a message, something is happening, you've got an experience that's worth sharing, share it. We learn as people by sharing stories. We learn from each other. And, you look at the bookshelf behind me, this is one, right? I mean, people have bookshelves like this. This is one in my house. I've got several more and at the office, because books are still valuable. And even if you have a book on a certain topic, you'll buy other books on that same topic because it's interesting to you. So I guess my message is, if you're feeling that nudge and any of those concerns, like somebody else has already written about it, or I'm not a good enough writer, or I don't know where to begin, I don't know how to do this, work through those fears and get it out there. It's worth it. It's worth it. And your story needs to be shared. Todd Durkin, my friend and mentor, often says, live a life worth telling a story about. And we all have that story to share. So just want to encourage you to do that.
What a perfect way to end. I love it. Not surprising, so encouraging and supportive. Kelli, thank you so much. We're going to put all of the contact info for Scriptor in the notes of the show, but just if people want to reach out to you, where's the best place to go?
Excellent. Scriptorpublishinggroup.com is the easiest. And you can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all at Scriptor Publishing Group as well.
Awesome. All right, Kelli, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always great to talk with you. Thanks so much, Christy.